did 8 liters. So after he drank that 8 liters, he then told me to get on his back so that he could show me the efficiency of those 8 liters.
I know this might sound really crazy.
Hello there and welcome back to the Tech Room. I am Eddie Carrera and today I am here with one of the movers and the shakers of the Silicon Savannah, Vincent Omondi. How are you doing?
Thank you, Eddie, and thanks for having me. So I'm Vincent Omondi and I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you mind telling the viewers a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Myself, I'm Vincent. I'm a co-founder and a CTO at Pay Hero Kenya. By profession, I'm a data engineer.
Okay. Fascinating. Vincent, you mentioned Pay Hero, and I actually want to take you back to those early days. You know, now that we have AI and all of these other tools, a lot of the processes, especially in the software industry, have become very streamlined. They've become very easy to undertake. But I want you to give me a story of a time when you did it to do manual work, when you did it brute force, when things weren't just working.
A funny experience. I remember that was around 2019. We, funnily enough, we had done an interview with KTN. And I believe after that interview, kind of like the week onset of that particular interview, we really got a very huge amount of surge generally for users. And the initial onset of what we hosted Pay Hero for was if you're in Kenya, you know, hosting PHP. You just host PHP in a shared hosting experience. And of course, as an individual, the shared hosting kind of like handles a lot of manual stuff for you. So you don't really have to just copy your files and have them generally in the particular cPanel. So when you got very high surge of users, and remember our normal users that were used to using the system are like, we can't access the system most of the time. And remember, we had to spend 3 days, myself and I believe one of our engineers, our tech leads, and just doing manual, just setting up Ubuntu manually, logging in, trying to set up firewall rules manually. Like, it was a very gruesome 3 days of our life, just trying to make sure that we are able to replicate the environment we had in the cPanel and just have that, especially in a Linux environment, because I remember we're using Linux that just gives you VMs, yes.
That does sound extremely difficult. Personally, I can't see myself in that situation. You're a stronger man than I am. Following up on that, how does that hard way of doing things, spending 3, which I'm sure was sleepless days, how does that hard way of building infrastructure compared to the tools available to a dev starting out today?
So it's kind of it's a two double-edged sword. That's what I wanted to say, because I remember when we kind of like did the very first infrastructure setup and we were doing all of these things manually. Yes, it's very gruesome. It's very painful. But the thing that it gives you the mental model in terms of how infrastructure works. Yeah, it's a very, very. If you talk to your product manager, for example, they won't be very happy for you because they're like, users need to use the system. Why are you telling me that you just have to do particular three days, kind of like doing this particular setup? So that difficulty becomes there, and also that gap in terms of just, I believe, dealing with angry customers. So that is, I believe, the very bad side of it. But the good side of it that you do have is that you have a mental model of how your architecture looks like. You have control how your architecture looks like. So in terms of a very long-term perspective, you know what the problems are. You know what generally to improve. It's like your farm. You know how generally to target every segment of it. With the general tools that exist right now, especially with AI, it has automated most of those particular stuff. Like right now, if I'm doing, if generally I want to set up a VM, it's probably a prompt. I'll be given some magic box that I probably am told run. And once I've run it, I'll have my VM and be able to deploy something. But if you check that, let's say in the onset list of something like 6 months, there's a very black magic box that I don't know how it works, for example. So if something generally comes to that particular, let's say, the infrastructure, then debugging becomes a thing that's not very, very painful because I don't know what has broken. Yes.
Okay. You mentioned something which I found very interesting, is that back in the old days, when you had old days, it wasn't that long ago, guys, but back then, when you had to go in and manually adjust everything, you'd gain a really good understanding of your system. I believe that would translate to even when your customers or whoever is interacting with you, they can see how well you know your system, and then in turn, that leads a little bit more of trust. And on that factor of trust, the Kenyan fintech scene is very much built on trust. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what's one thing about building trust with Kenyan businesses that hasn't changed regardless of whether you're using the old infrastructure or the new methods?
So Kenyan, I believe it's probably something. Kenyans are very funny. With businesses, we are very, very impatient. So, for example, if somebody gets paid their money, they don't want to wait for 2 seconds to get that particular money, because you are generally going to get a client who's very pissed off at using, let's say, your system. You're going to a business person who's generally pissed at the client that have not received your money. And that's why I think people love M-Pesa, because once you do M-Pesa, you just share a message for the case. So generally what has not changed is the speed at which these businesses want to have access. And another thing that has not changed is the businesses that we do have, they love money sitting in their bank accounts and their tails. Yes.
Wow. So thank you. We're going to talk a lot about AI in this India, especially as it relates to fintech industry, because it's a very relevant topic, I feel.
Yeah, true, yes.
Absolutely. So there is a trap that a lot of companies are falling into increasingly. The market is being flooded with AI rappers. For our non-technical audience, and please, tafadhali, correct me if I'm wrong, a rapper is just an AI engine with your skin on top,
Yeah, true.
Okay.
That is perfect. Yes.
So I have to defer to the big boys. 8 years of experience. So, as a builder, how do you ensure that you're creating local utility, utilizing these AI tools rather than just adding to all of these noise?
So I think the very first thing is, I think if you're in data world, there's something that you'll always hear no matter you're doing AI. And people generally think that AI is a very new thing. The only difference between AI is that Google has been doing AI for like whatever since the onset of the time. The only difference is that AI has become consumerized. It's now accessible to everyday person. And one of the key things that you'll hear in data, especially and AI, is first principles, generally, which is the key term is contextualization. So, for example, if I take an AI is under the hood is statistics.
Yeah.
So with statistics, it infers something that's under the hood. So I think what people build, especially when you noted that people build wrappers, is that, for example, people take a Western solution that's very centric in terms of how Western solution is, and you try serve that to, let's say, my mom in Ushago, who doesn't know even what a credit card is. Yeah, you just know that I'm messaging money, for example. So the key thing that I think fintechs can probably do is one key aspect that people forget to do, which is kind of like, how do you say, data aggregation. And you had this thing that came that AI was the likes of these big tech companies were using data annotation, especially Kenyan people. And they spend almost, I think, OpenAI spend almost, I think, around 10 billion just for people to look at images and correctly contextualize those particular, let's say, the data that they get. So that data aggregation layer is something that's very, very important for fintechs to do. Otherwise, you'll just get data that when a westernized person uses it or a person uses it quite well, they understand them quite well. But if, let's say, somebody, let's say, in Kenya try to use it, they don't understand the environment. So there has to be a lot of kind of like a work done in terms of collecting what is the context of the Kenyan people, for example, and how do we take this particular, there's something called feature engineering. So we take the data that exists, feature engineer this particular thing, then do something called filtration, then retrain the AI. Then now, once we have that particular thing, then we're like, yeah, we've taken the ChatGPT, which has abstracted for us the infrastructure out, but what we've done is that we've contextualized the data.
I really like that explanation, super simple. I feel like I've understood it well. Have you considered something in academia, the lecturer I do? I mean, you have the credentials, you have that master's, huh?
Yeah, funny. I can explain simply because I did master in data analytics and engineering.
Okay, I like that. Follow-up question.
Yes.
How is AI changing the way your team specifically handles boring or boilerplate code? Does it actually shorten the path to getting to an MVP, the minimum viable product?
Yeah, so basically what now done is coding as per the key term, which people used to say engagement gateway is quite cheap. So most probably, especially for my team, the real thing is that can we spend more time with the users? Can we spend more time with, let's say, with the product side of things? Because initially you want the product team, then you generally had the engineers that for them was dealing with the boilerplate stuff. So now the boilerplate stuff has not been automated. So for example, for us as a team, mostly is every single engineer is kind of like considered a product engineer. So spend more time with the users, try and understand how the users are generally getting the system, because the code part is generally automated for you. So that we build things that actually is trying to tell the stories or even how users are trying to use our systems.
Well, on that note, for trying to understand the users, I have seen a lot of products, very unfortunately, whereby the focus is on cramming as much functionality in it as possible, and then it neglects the simplicity from a user side. What's your thoughts on that shift?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell again another funny story.
Please.
Just to explain the particular concept. Initially, let's say before, there's something that people used to think Steve Jobs was this cracked out programmer. He was not. He was very good in terms of abstracting what users were saying. So, for example, in the early 2000s, people just knew keyboards. And what people are generally saying, if we can have a very small computer keyboard on our laps that we can use to send emails, send photos, and stuff like that, they were talking about in terms of we need smaller computers. But based on how people are using this particular environment is that most people try to do that. So if you realize there were the flip phones, I believe even Microsoft created something that was the QWERTY keyboard. But they were like, these people don't want smaller computers, which is just bigger computers, but now kind of like mashed up into a very small thing. What they were talking about, do we need smartphones? Something we can easily type with, something that gives us better experience. We were talking about a better experience and portability. So yes, people are saying smaller computers, but that's not what they were saying. So the key thing that I think people are mostly missing is trying to implement every single thing that users request for, which is users don't know what they want. They tell you symptoms of what they want, but not actually what they want. So what generally product team can generally do is take all of these particular things, see the pattern, aggregate, and generally come to an abstract something that answers every single let's say questions, or most of the questions that users are generally talking about, as opposed to trying to implement every single thing that, let's say, user A told me, user B told me. Yes.
Yeah. So when you say abstraction, you just mean like hiding the implementation from the users.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. On that note, I feel like because of the rise of so many tools, the barrier for entry into a lot of industries has been lowered, especially for a number of founders. We actually find ourselves in situations where a number of founders aren't technical in the truest sense of the word. And this next question is probably going to answer something that they might have encountered. For our non-technical founders, how might they use AI and those associated technologies, especially in fintech, to avoid the technical debt that usually kills a lot of startups in their first year? And before you answer, kindly tell them what a technical debt is.
So basically, what a technical debt is, for example, you take a shortcut so that, let's say, to get users, you generally take a shortcut for, I believe, quicker release generally. So, for example, if, let's say, like even I give you a scenario of ourselves, we never started with building microservices or stuff like that. We decided like, we don't want to manage servers, let us give it in a cPanel. That's a technical debt because we know this is not scalable, but for now, it's going to serve the purpose it's supposed to do for now. But we know it's not a scalable solution. So that is what a technical debt generally is, yes. So generally, in terms of what founders can generally do is, that's a very tricky question to deal with AI. Because AI, by the true sense, it's a statistical, it's generally a statistical thing, and generally as something becomes quite complex, it adds entropy. So basically what it does is that it's basically just enforcing itself. It's just adding more technical debt for yourself. So I think what founders can probably do is that founders are fast movers. Yeah, that's not going to change. Yeah. So generally what you can do yourself is either first thing, invest probably in knowing the fundamentals, just the first principles, or let's say, of doing engineering and stuff like that, which in itself kind of like plays around what founders generally are. So you can have generally, and make sure that you have at least a technical founder or a technical founding team member that their work is mostly to do for you system engineering. You can do the shortcuts in terms of releasing things as quick as possible. They can do for you the mopping and just making sure that in the long term, as you release product as fast as possible, you don't hit yourself in a point which either you scaled too fast and the bills are way too high, or your product itself is non-scalable.
Okay, so that's actually fascinating that you talk about scalable and non-scalable, because those actually come a little bit later. But since you want to talk about it right now, first off, what is scalable architecture?
So generally, a scalable architecture is something that's able to preempt mostly. Okay, that's called able to preempt traffic. So if traffic is generally low, how does it kind of like make sure that you're not spending too much? So you are able to automatically, so generally your infrastructure is able to kind of like use up resources based on how users are using your platform. So if you're using more and much more resources, how do you automate that generally? Process that to make sure that, let's say today our peak was at 10 million users, your infrastructure is generally able to play and make sure that users are not blocking themselves out. If today you had a very peak or a very low day, for example, and you only have 100,000 users, how do you make sure that you don't have 10 other resources just lying around and you're paying for it. So ability to kind of like preempt generally user traffic is what I'll call a scalable infrastructure.
And out of the box, somebody who's just opened their laptop, maybe they've opened the CLI client, they don't know Cloud Code, what have you, and then they just type in, give me $1 billion startup idea, make no mistakes. Yeah, that's the one that they push. For those types of people, how would they avoid falling into this sort of trap whereby the architecture that you're utilizing is not very scalable?
So I think one of the key things that you can, there's something in AI that's trying to solve that particular problem because, and it's called skills. So I think, for example, if your first principle is not good as an engineer, then measure more in terms of dealing with skills. So for example, there are skills, let's say you can have cloud code skills in terms of building a scalable general infrastructure and stuff like that. So measure more in terms of understand those particular skills, how to augment generally those skills and specialize them generally for your need. So that will become the very first thing that advice that generally I'll give them in the long term, because again, as it grows, those things get broken at some particular point. So doing that reinforcement loop yourself and making sure that at least for yourself, you've learned some, I believe some fundamentals in terms of infrastructure becomes key. But the key thing that AI gives is that you don't have to learn that now for you to get started. You get started, and as AI gives you all of these things, you can use the skills to kind of like augment that process, but also use that process to also learn and understand. For example, don't have a black box that you don't understand what's the entire inside of it, because you'll be surprised.
So I'm hearing what you're saying is there is still very much a place for technical members on the team, at least in the fintech industry. Then people shouldn't be worried that Opus 5 got released now, I need to start backing up. That's not a concern right now. Okay, perfect. Sort of in that same vein, what is one skill that AI will never be able to replace in a high-performing engineer?
I believe that is mostly product. Because AI won't tell you the key thing that I talk about. AI won't tell you how, because especially if you do fintechs in Africa, you'll realize that, for example, users are very, we are very diverse. For example, if let's say Ushago, I'll say, for example, for that particular case, if I go to my mom in Shags, I try to give her a solution which, for example, she was using to run, my mom has a place where people watch football. And for her, she was like, I need my money in my bank, like Muta Kinilipa, it goes directly to my bank account. If you come to Nairobi, somebody is running a business, they're like, okay, I need you guys to collect this money and generally disburse it for me at the end of the day once it's collected. So basically what you have in that particular loop is that understanding of how users are using a system. AI is never going to understand that. It's the humans able to understand those behaviors and understand how to build products around those particular things. Yes.
Okay, lovely. And is there a particular path, maybe even a course, that an engineer can take if they want to improve this particular skill, or do they just have to just throw themselves at the problem until they will come with the solution?
So I think for a path that you can probably do is I think there's a course in edX by UC Berkeley that mostly teaches people how to do product engineering. So I think it's a path in software development MicroMasters generally, and that's the thing that probably I took. Or you can learn economics.
That's why economics. I didn't see that concept.
So funny thing that probably people don't know is that I'm not a computer science graduate. I am an economist. Yeah. So basically what economics or business courses teaches you is what are people generally saying? It's teaching you social science, which is something that, yes, technical people don't generally get most of the stuff, how people use the system, because for them, they're engineers, they see things in terms of numbers. But when you're dealing with people, it's not numbers, it's feeling. So,
I would like you to give us your hot take. What is the most ignored or underrated opportunity in the Kenyan tech ecosystem that everybody's either overlooking or completely missing right now?
I think it's going to be fun enough, but I think it's generally hardware parts, which is mostly energy. So, for example, if you go, if you're in Nairobi, for example, things are very automated, things are very, very good. Internet accessibility is very, very good, and everything works perfectly. But generally, if you go up country, then you'll realize that most of them, for example, don't have. You're going to see one thing that's very common. You're going to see, I think, copper, and you're going to see generally daylight. And if you generally check, especially for daylight, these are mostly kind of like European energy companies that are generally coming on the ground. Even the softwares that are powering that particular delight is by, I think, Solaris Off-Grid. Solaris Off-Grid is a Spanish company. So generally you realize that, especially from the hardware part, like every single, I believe, the tech ecosystem within Kenya is neglected. So people live within the cities. Like if tech, probably people just talk about Nairobi. People don't care what happens, let's say, for example, in Panpieri, down there generally in Kisumu. So I think there's that particular neglect that people have. And if you go down there and you start looking at those particular tech companies, you realize they're non-Kenyan companies. They're mostly European companies. Wow. Even for software that I think pretty much every business in Kenya can compete, let's say, large off-grid, they don't, yes.
They don't. So you're saying for anybody who's maybe looking for the next big thing, in quotations, they're looking for a way to find success, they're looking for a way, basically, then they need to enter the hardware space, and not just the hardware space, but specifically hardware as it relates to energy.
Exactly, yes.
So personally, I'm going to take advantage of the period before this podcast comes out to go and find out as much as I can, and I try to enter that industry myself.
So the game that you're playing today is called Plot Twist. So, both of you have 10 minutes. Okay, so 5. Oh, okay, I'm on 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. So what you're going to do is, one of you, you'll decide who will start a story, but then the other person has to pick up and give us the craziest plot twist.
Wow.
And from there, the other person now picks it up again and gives us a plot twist.
So it's like composition, but so you
have
have to give the craziest stand.
Kingdom, lakini ulikuwa uko ukiosha baba. Something you don't expect. Something you don't expect to hear. Are we clear?
Yes.
So hapa ni the funniest person. Kama wewe ndio the funniest person, you automatically win.
No pressure.
Alrighty. Does the story have to be like any amount of sentences?
No, just like
okay. So I walked into a car dealership because I needed an SUV for my family.
Okay. So, for example, when I noticed, for example, when you walk to this particular car dealership, for myself, I never knew, for example, amount of oil that you need to have in a car, generally, yes.
So I went and I asked the salesman, how much oil do I need to have in this car? And then he started drinking it to show me.
Oh, wow. Okay, so generally, basically, it was kind of like a demonstration to kind of like show me, for example, I believe, especially for an SUV, how much generally you need to take your car, let's say, for a particular period of time. And I did not know generally the measurement. So me, what I was told that I needed 8 liters.
You did 8 liters. So after he drank that 8 liters, he then told me to get on his back so that he could show me the efficiency of those 8 liters.
I know this might sound really crazy. That's a plot twist.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, so I believe for me it was a very fun experience, just to kind of like show, for example, that especially the strength in terms of, because he had to carry this big person on his back and just demonstrate that, yeah, you are now getting a big boy car.
You're now getting a big boy car. Okay. After he told me that, I didn't know how to tell him that my wife was bigger than me. So while he might have been able to carry me, I don't know about the rest of my family.
I know how I look. Please don't picture anything general in your mind. My wife is a very caring person, generally. I really laughed at that particular thing, and of course everybody laughed. But you have to get generally serious and be like, yeah, I wanted to get an SUV, I wanted to kind of like get what is this that needed for that particular oil, so that I'll generally know, because this is the first time myself getting a car.
Very true. I have to mud my brain cells. I can't. I fold. Give it to Vincent.
3 minutes. You went on for 3 minutes. So.
Okay. It's a true story, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a true story. So I remember the very first time I got to Nairobi. So I got to how do you say, an elevator. Yeah.
I remember seeing you get on that elevator, and And I wondered to myself, why does he only have one sandal?
I'm trying to be serious. Yeah. So basically, a funny story about the sandal was that the previous day we went to STR and we trespassed. So myself, I never knew generally when you go to a trespassing space, you could generally be arrested.
Yeah.
So we got arrested by the police around the STR. And I remember when of course, we paid something small. So when I got from that place, I just got my belt, got my shorts, and I just forgot my sandals and got myself in the Uber.
You just said the whole sandal was enough. Oh, no, do you know what? I remember that because I think we were in the same jail cell. Were you in the cell with the guy that he had a tooth growing out of his lip?
Oh, yeah. And trust to me, that night was very, very scary for me because remember, this is my first time generally in a police cell. So it was definitely very kind of very scary for me and a very scary experience. And that probably explains the very first time when I got to an elevator. I remember me sitting there just wondering the next day, so it's going up, it's going down. So, and I'm seeing people pressing things because this is the first time I'm seeing buttons. So I'm sitting and I'm like, okay, so where do I want to go? I was just told, for example, come to Anniversary Towers and stuff like that.
For me, personally, the elevators that I used before I came to Nairobi, I'm also new to the area as well. There weren't any buttons. There was a man, and he had this sort of thing that he would pull up and down, to go. So I remember thinking to myself, this man must know how to cook really good ugali because that continuous motion of like this, that's how you get soft ugali.
I trap like because you run from that particular side.
Guys, we don't have to say who won. Yeah, thank you. That's everything.
Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to hear more in the similar vein, or just generally about tech and anything that relates to you as a founder or somebody who just wants to find more success, then follow the Tech Room on every imaginable platform. Follow us on TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. It's been a very enlightening conversation.
Thank you, Eddie. For me, it's a pleasure also to appear in this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.